Welcome to our webinar. Welcome to our webinar. Our theme today is the second great conversation, a triumph. We open a new conversation, a new relationship. So hard in B2B selling, right? It's a great first call. Maybe we come back and talk about it with our colleagues, and then the prospect vanishes. Radio silence. What can pure selling accomplish? Today, we're going to have a sampling from urgency-based selling of some of the things that pure selling can accomplish. First, some analysis. Could we be facing the reversal curve? When we look at a selling process, you might think that it's linear. We have a first call, a second call, a third call, a fourth call, and we close. It's kind of linear. But when we're facing radio silence, I think something else is at play. We have that first call, we build the urgency to the point of that first call, and very, very frequently we go into the trough of the reversal curve. The prospect's responding well to us when we're there, but then they have other things to do, and maybe they have an incumbent supplier. And the real story in selling very often is how do we fight our way back to that second meeting when it seems to be linear at that point, but in effect, we have reversal after reversal till the urgency is high enough so that the deal closes. We're going to talk today about yin and yang tactics, strong and soft tactics to help you overcome the reversal curve. A core issue here is, are we an option or are we must have? In the first interaction, the prospect is often doing research for a future option. They may buy from us in the future. So their first call is fact-finding, right? And so they may be interacting with us in a very positive way. But after that, if they think they have all the information they need to vet us out as an option, there's no need to speak to us anymore on a selling perspective. So an idea you might want to discuss as a power of the wisdom of the room is, what do we do to make sure we're not just seen as an option at some future date? Here's a way to visualize it. If there's an incumbent vendor, it's as if the vendor is at the top of a slanted soccer field. All they need to do is roll the ball downhill. Where we're coming in as a new potential resource, we have to kick that ball upfield, and that's very difficult to do. So ideally, what we'd like to do is level the playing field. See, if we come in and we're selling, there's no need to talk to us. But if we're bringing wisdom, that's something different. That could be a reason to talk to us, to come back from radio silence. Another way to talk about wisdom is type 3 knowledge. This helps earn the right to fact-finding and to future meetings. So what is type 3 knowledge? Well, type 1 is what you know, type 2 is what you know you don't know, and type 3 is what you don't realize you don't know. This is a great way to start, build, and continue a relationship and come back from radio silence. So whenever we prepare for any sales call, an important question is, what wisdom are you bringing to the table? And then what wisdom can you use to come back from radio silence? How do you acquire wisdom? Well, some of us in selling have been doing it for 5, 10, 20, 30 years or more, but some people are new. So how do you get wisdom? Well, one way is from talking to your colleagues, the power of the wisdom in the room. And by the way, that's a standard operating procedure. But another way is just to talk to your customers if you have customers, or even prospects, and ask them, what are some of the best practices? What are the best practices in your business? And if you speak to 20 people like that, you're going to acquire, if you can get them talking, some wisdom. Now, let's put this in the context of a selling process. In urgency-based selling, our program, there's 3 parts. 1 to 7 sets up the serious conversation. Once you're in a serious conversation, you can do your fact finding. What you're going to try to discover in your fact finding are the must-haves. And once you know what the must-haves are, you can determine, do you think there's a fit? And then prove our case and close the sale. What we're talking about right now are freebies. Step 5 of the standard sales call, the wisdom that you bring. So the standard sales call is an important method to open and develop an opportunity. And I'm just kind of giving you a handle of where wisdom fits in the first call, but it could also be used for re-entry into more calls. Now, one of the reasons step 1 to 7 is so important, because in that first call, in the first 15 to 30 minutes of the first call, the prospect usually puts us in 1 or 2 buckets, safe or serious, safe or serious. If we're safe, they're never going to get us a stick of business, and it's most likely that they're looking to get an education, but also more importantly, sometimes an alternative price. Now, as we approach this process of new business development, an important challenge can be the 2 hats challenge. Let's talk about it. The hat we often wear every day is selling a meeting with friendlies, existing customers, 70–80% of our time. And that's a different hat or mindset than when we're selling change, trying to open new accounts. Now, the reason I mention this is because if you're in the everyday selling mindset and you bring that into a new business development call, that could lead to a train wreck, because we're a change agent. Change is hard. Change involves grieving. And we need to beware that we're not arrogant, that we earn the right to each step. So what I have discovered is it's so hard to do this oscillation and to cherry pick when do you do it. The best way to sell is to do the whole program all the time. So one check-in point for you is, as you go into a call, which hat are you wearing? Back from radio silence, the second conversation. Okay, what can you do? What can you do? Well, first of all, research. So now we're in radio silence. And again, we have 170 best practices. I'm just giving you a sampling of some things you could do to come back from radio silence. Have you done your research? You may be surprised to hear that the average salesperson does no research. Let me give you an example. I have a woodworking company that's a prospect. They do about $15 million in sales. They have 5 salespeople. And I was doing well with the owner, and then he kind of went radio silent. I actually did some work for him, but he went radio silent. I was in a Costco parking lot the other day, and I saw this vehicle, this woodworking vehicle, with the headline, "The only corner we cut is a miter corner." Well, I took a picture of this, call this research. I took a picture of it with my iPhone. I sent it to my client, and don't you know, they came back out of radio silence to let me know it's 2 months from now they'll be ready to talk again. Will they? I don't know for sure. What are the hot button issues that you can use to nail an urgency? This is another great power of the wisdom in the room exercise with your team. You could use these hot button issues to pull them back into the conversation. We've already talked about the freebies driven by wisdom. This is always a great re-entry strategy. I just gave a seminar, and one of the people asked the question, how often can I interact? By the way, just as a reminder, at the end of this webinar, I'll allow 5 to 10 minutes for questions if there are any. So the question came out, how often can I interact? And I like to quote the Standard & Poor's standard for follow-up. I once called on Standard & Poor's, and they said that all of their divisions can interact once a week with a prospect. So that's one answer, is once a week. Another answer is anytime you can make a material difference. And that comes from your hot button urgency issues and from your freebies. Another tactic you use to come back from radio silence are your testimonials. fantastic testimonials, and ideally a testimonial that addresses the objection that the current prospect has. What are your great testimonials? By the way, if you want to get some examples of written and video testimonials, send me an email. Your economic justification. Have you done a before and after economic justification? And perhaps with a sensitivity analysis, which shows if different assumptions hold, how will that affect the economic justification? I have a worksheet that I prepare for clients for this, and they can change the assumptions themselves. Now, when you've done this well, and you come back from radio silence, here are two things you'll want to check if you didn't check them the first time round. Why are you talking to me? And why now? When somebody comes back from radio silence, why now? That's often the money question. Now, is it one thing? I've given you just, 5 broad categories. Is it one thing that will bring them back from radio silence? Sometimes. More often, it's a combination. This typically requires discovery and experimentation and effort, right? And it can be different for different businesses. And by the way, it changes over time, because if you come up with a procedure, an algorithm for bringing somebody back from radio silence, over time, maybe over 6, 12 months, someone else will discover it. There's a half-life. It's not as effective, and you're going to have to discover new things. To me, that's a bit important part of why selling is exciting, because of this never-ending need to discover what works. Now, if you want to be in discovery mode, a great way to do this is with level 5 leadership and mindset. This is described by Collins in Good to Great. In particular, he talks about how to use the window and mirror properly to be a level 5 leader. So what's a level 5 leader? They're strong, they're competent, they're confident, and they're humble at the same time. Wait a second, Andy, you say, isn't it one or the other? Isn't it either that you're strong or you're humble? That's what's called the tyranny of the or. The strongest salespeople do both, and here's a method that Collins offers, not with the illustration, how to do it. So when things go well, you look outside the window, you give credit to the team. When things don't go well, you hold the mirror up to your face, you own it, and you say, what else could I have done? When you're dysfunctional, you reverse these roles, which means with success, you say, wow, I'm great, great job, Andy. And when things don't go well, you look outside the window and you ask yourself, who could I blame? The prices were too high, or we didn't have the right inventory. Using the mirror properly is the opposite of learned helplessness. My personal standard is I try to test 2 new ideas every week. And I got to tell you, when I test them, like with MailChimp and so on, there's a lot of garbage. So I keep a large size garbage can on hand for ideas that don't work. What I share in urgency-based selling are the ideas that do work. As an example, one of my assignments with a sales team of 6 salespeople, each of them was assigned a whale where the owner wanted to open a discussion and maybe get some business where it was radio silence. Every week for 16 weeks, we sent something different out to provoke and motivate and interest them, and we had an 80% connection rate. We actually got some business from some of them. And it's from this never-ending zest for discovery, to discover new ideas. Now, here's a technique you can use to bring to urgency. This would be, of course, in the first call. Hey, Mr. Prospect, Miss Prospect, is this an important project? And if it is, do you want to fast track it or back burner it? This is a technique to help convert interest to urgency. I also show this to you because I use animations like this in my email outreach. And you can send me a request after the webinar if you're interested, and I'll be glad to send you 1 or 2 animations in email so you can see how they work. Now, how could you use the fast track technique in that first call? Well, a best practice is always ask, what were your takeaways at the end of the meeting? And then you say, I got it. You're interested in X. Is this fast track or back burner? Hopefully they're going to say fast track, and now you say, when can we set up our next call, right? So that way you've got it booked. Now they could cancel, or let's say it's too late, you didn't ask this question. Okay, we already had the first call and we're back in radio silence again. What else can we do besides what we've already discussed? Here are some additional tactics, just a sampling of the 170. Here are things we could do to return from radio silence. Of course, we've already talked about sending wisdom. There's never a cap on that. You could always send wisdom. We're going to talk briefly about the handwritten note, going higher in the food chain, challenging the prospect's thinking, the incomplete storytelling technique. So let's look at these in turn. Here's a handwritten note that I sent to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. After I sent 3 of them in a 3-day FedEx, and I'll talk about that more in a moment, I got this email from the executive assistant, and I got in and I had meetings. I did a project where I did this with 100 prospects I wanted to meet. It's a handwritten note in a 3-day FedEx. You know, the typical recipient can't tell the difference between an overnight FedEx and a 3-day, so 3 days a lot cheaper. And when they rip it open and they see a handwritten note, it's like a wow, right? So out of 100 I targeted, not where I had a first call, but where I just wanted to meet people, I had 15 first meetings. Now, in looking at some of these ideas, is it possible we could be held back by self-limiting assumptions? What are those? Like you might think, hey, I'm doing everything that can be done. Now, this is a classic picture illustrating a self-limiting assumption. What's happening here? Roger Bannister is running the 4-minute mile for the first time in the West. And until he did it, it was thought to be impossible. And that's one of the reasons it wasn't done. You may not know that in the year after he ran the 4-minute mile, somebody beat his time. So as we go through this process, you might want to think about, are there any self-limiting assumptions that are holding you back? Another technique I mentioned is stronger language to challenge the prospect to come back from radio silence. Here's a subject line. I'm surprised I haven't heard back from you. Now, ideally, this will be combined with some must-have discovery you did in the first call. So the subject line is, I'm surprised I haven't heard back from you. Hey, Joe Jane, I'm surprised you didn't return my call. When we last talked, you told me you needed a new vendor with prompt delivery as a must-have. Did your current vendor, get better, meet the need? Did something change? This is a way to use stronger language to re-enter. Now, here's something that might cause you to say, won't this ruin my relationship? Let's say the sales process is going nowhere. You might adopt the 3 strikes and you're out process or system. 3 strikes and you're out to escalate. Escalate means really raising the energy level, using stronger language, and in particular, you might want to consider going higher in the food chain. Sometimes when we talk to a lower level decision maker, they're making decisions to suit their convenience, and they're not aligned with ownership or leadership. So it's one of the reasons I always recommend start at the top, because if we could get an owner or CEO who's interested and they refer you to the right person, at least now you have political cover from the top. You might say, you can't do that. Well, you can do that. Just to give you a case history, we had a client, big client, selling paper to printers, and the buyer just didn't want to talk to the salesperson. So what was there to lose? We went to the owner, and can you believe it? We were in there within a week or so, and we closed the sale. 4 transformational words. I've been giving you specific tactics. This is a little bit more general. If things are not going well, here are 4 transformational words that will revolutionize your life. And it's a way to think about getting back into that radio silence scenario. Bold vision, bold behavior. Are you being bold enough in your vision? Are you being bold enough in your behavior? An example, how did I get into this crazy business of sales training? I had another business and I'd hired a new accountant. And after I hired them, they brought me in or invited me in to sell me an add-on product to basic accounting services. After the 1 hour presentation and speaking to the named partner in the accounting firm, I asked, is this how you folks normally sell? And Bert said, yeah, it was pretty good, wasn't it? I said, gee, I thought it needed work. So about a week or two later, I call Bert back and I say, Bert, you and your 6 partners, these are CPAs, need to hire me to teach you how to sell. Crazy, right? So at this point, there's radio silence because Bert has to convince his partners to bring me in for, for a meeting. So I feed him wisdom and enough wisdom. So now I'm meeting with the 3 named partners. On one side of the table, David, Lewis, and Bert. I'm on the other. And just to summarize the high points of the meeting, 4 questions they asked me. Hey, Andy, have you ever done this for CPAs? No. Do you have some testimonial letters for success stories you've had in doing the program you're proposing? No. Have you ever done this at any time, anywhere for anyone? No. Do you have some curriculum you could show us to give us an idea of what you would teach us if we bring you in? No. Then what the heck makes you think you could do this? I said, it's simple. You made a presentation, it was here, it should be here, and I could fill the gap. Now, in reality, they did like my ideas, so they proposed a test. They took me out on a sales call. My instructions were to zip my lips, look, listen, debrief afterwards. Well, for the first hour of the sales call, where they were trying to close a manufacturer on the accounting, I followed my instructions, and then I couldn't take it anymore because they weren't following good rules and practices. So I raised my hand. They melted the accountants. The owner of the business asked me, hey, I was wondering if you can ever say something. What do you want to know? I asked 2 questions and I closed the sale. 2 questions. And about a month later, the CPAs hired me. And during the 6 months we worked together, their closing ratio went from 20% to 80%. Accounting Today wrote up a front page story about what I did with the CPA firm. Now, what I just did for you is the incomplete storytelling technique, because I didn't tell you what the 2 questions were. By the way, if you'd like to know, send me an email and I'll tell you what the 2 questions are. But here's something to think about. How could you make an incomplete presentation where you say to the client, and next time I'm going to go over this, that sets up the next call. And the simplest version of that is the 2-call close, where you do fact finding on the first call and you present on the second call. But then if all they want is a price, right, then you're in radio silence again. So the thought question for you here, are you bold enough in your vision? Are you bold enough in your behavior? Now, if you do the standard sales call, you have less need for escalation because in the first 15 to 30 minutes of the first meeting, they put you in the serious category and not in the safe category. So 1 to 7 sets up the serious conversation, 8 to 12 is fact finding, and 13 to 18 is managing the opportunity. And again, we're giving a big emphasis today to the idea of wisdom. What is the wisdom that you're bringing to the meetings, right? So let me conclude here with a case history of me being in radio silence recently. It started last fall, had a great first meeting. We had a Zoom demo. The guy loved what I had to say, and you know the story. Then I had radio silence for 8 weeks. The weeks are going by, and I'm wondering, should I give up? But I knew from that first meeting that this prospect had an urgent need. What can Pure Selling accomplish? I kept on sending them good ideas. No response, and checking in. And then on 12/19, at the end of the year, when it's too late for anything, I just sent this follow-up text. And what do you know? He said, I'm going to be in New Jersey tomorrow. He's on the West Coast, VP of sales, and the mothership is on the East Coast. Why is he responding to me? I'm wondering. So we had this back and forth. How about Wednesday or Thursday? Thursday would be better. Here are some times I could meet. How about 10? And we're set. What did I learn in this 90-minute meeting? It's a $200 million division, 10 billion parent, 25 salespeople. They need to double sales in the next 5 years. Hey, why did you stop communicating with me? Well, sales were down. I had to focus on sales calls. Why did you invite me in? Why now? Well, I was coming to New Jersey. Yeah, but why did you make it easy for me? He didn't have to respond to my text. And then it came out. The CEO prefers another national training company. He doesn't. So what did he do as the sign of serious? He's going to try to set up in the next month or so a meeting with the CEO. And then guess what? History repeats itself. So radio silence for another 4 months. Can you believe that? So should I give up? No. Every week I send something new. I once did this 75 weeks in a row, a new idea. And at the end of that, the owner came to me and said, gee, where there's smoke, there must be fire. And he wound up hiring me to train 4 different teams over a series of years. It's because you don't give up. So now what happens after 4 months? Yesterday, after another follow-up, how is the timing for a catch-up call? How about this afternoon? Holy cow, what's going on here? So we made an appointment to talk. And by the way, whenever I start a Zoom meeting, I send a notice because people forget. So what did I learn in the 45-minute meeting? Sales were soft in the first quarter. He didn't want to focus on training. He claims he convinced the CEO that the national training option wasn't a fit, maybe. Sales recovered in April. He has improved process, but he needs help. He wants every call to be primo. He's going to be in New Jersey in July, and he's going to try to set up a meeting with the CEO. Will it happen? I don't know. But I'm using the techniques. So let's review now. Tactics to secure the second call, to return from radio silent. Send wisdom, send wisdom. Before every call, what is the wisdom? Use animations in your email. Here's another one showing the WOW toolbox. If you want to get a copy of this, send it to me, and you'll see how it plays in emails. Use the handwritten note, and particularly with a 3-day FedEx. Build your brand. Go higher in the food chain. Go to the CEO. Challenge the prospect's thinking. Bold vision, bold behavior. I have a couple other things here that I'll do in another webinar. And use the technique of the complete story. Well, we know that Rome wasn't built in a day, so we've almost at the end of today's webinar. If you have any questions, after I tell you about the next webinar, I'm going to set some time aside to answer questions. You could use the box at the bottom of your screen or your control panel. Our next webinar on August 16th is maximize your selling wisdom and assets. You have selling wisdom, you have selling assets, but are they being maximized? How do you do that? All right, I'll take questions now for 5-10 minutes. Thank you all for joining us, for those of you who have to leave. And by the way, if you want anything that I talked about, send an email to this email address, and I'll be glad to send you the information. Here's a question. I want to reduce selling process time. It seems like what you're talking about will extend the selling process. It will extend, oh, here's something, another one here. It will extend the selling process. Well, it might, but remember, we're in radio silence. So if what you're saying is you're looking for like one sentence that's going to pull it back, I don't think I know that. I don't know the answer to that. I see we have something coming in. Write the question that you have, the person who wrote that, type it in there. Type the question. So, or send it to me via email. So if you're looking to truncate the selling process, by making the moves I'm showing, it's going to shrink, condense the selling cycle. But if you're asking the question, is there one line that I can use? That I don't have, other than I'm surprised I haven't heard back from you. Oh, here's the question. I sell in the construction industry. I'm often cold calling, presenting them when they not realize the need. They need to act very interested, but then they go silent. Well, case histories could help. That's where the testimonials come in, and just continuously staying in touch. Use wisdom, use hot button, use testimonials. If you're using all of those and it's not going anywhere, send me a note and I'll see if I can come up with something else for you. Do you ever lose a relationship if you escalate? That's another question. Let's see, they tend to go. Do you ever lose a relationship when you escalate? Yes. That's terrible. I don't want to lose a relationship. Okay, just bear in mind that there really is no relationship. They're either buying nothing or they're buying very little. And so there really isn't a relationship to lose. But if you were asking the question, does this ever blow up in your face? The answer is yes. But if you've got enough going on all the time, not just one prospect, the net impact is going to be a massive increase in your sales. I gave the prospect price on the second call, and now there's radio silence. Now what do I do? Well, a couple of things. One idea is, ideally, we don't give the price until we feel the prospect knows enough to make a decision. And if you've made all the right moves, you're in the serious category. And if you're not being treated seriously, then I would recommend using all the techniques of the standard sales call to build a serious relationship. I'll take one more question before I wrap up here. What if they're saying yes to you all the time? They're giving you all the little yeses, and at the end they say no. Now what do you do? And they don't want to have another meeting. Don't rush me. I'm busy, things of this nature. I would submit that one of several things is possible. It is possible you're not doing all the steps in the process. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that, you know, a certain number of prospects are just, they're not meant for you. I think it's 16%. That statistic has been debated. And so if they're not right, there's nothing you're going to be able to do. But if it was really true that you did the program, you got all the yeses as you went along, and you came to the end of the program of the sales call, and you know you did the fast track technique, and then the prospect says, "Don't push me, don't rush me, I don't want to meet." Then I would say, I think we need to discover something new. This is constant discovery. It's not something that's happened to me, but I'd be glad to brainstorm it with you. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thanks so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you at our next webinar in a month. And if you have any questions or comments, please send me an email. Thanks very much and have a great day. Bye-bye now.